The Dallas Mavericks just played a phenomenal game versus the LA Lakers. I did not watch pretty much 90% of the game, but I saw that it was close, and after I watched my Bulls finally get a damn win, which was very nice to see because apparently that doesn't happen anymore, I went downstairs and watched the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Apparently, Luka Doncic was concussed, or at least seemed to show symptoms of it, but the game was very good. As soon as Danny Green hit that three-pointer, I pretty much knew it was over. Granted, Dwight Howard was holding Seth Curry on that play. But I still think there were positive things to take away from that game. The fact that they were one missed call away from being 4-1 and beating the Los Angeles Lakers is a good sign for them and their future. And it's a good sign for how good they can be right now. They've opened up the year 3-2 after that win, but like I said, if not for that Dwight Howard hold, they would have a 4-1 record right now. Luka is off to a very good start. He's been playing point guard for them, which I do think is the best thing for them down the line. Not necessarily right now because of the personnel that they have and the positions that they have of strength and weakness, but it does work. He's been averaging 26 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 8.5 assists on 54, 32, 77 splits. That 32% from three is not great, but he's been shooting around 8 threes a game, and I do think he's going to be in the same boat as James Harden down the line, and still kind of now, where his three-point percentage is never really going to be that great, but he's going to be one of the best three-point shooters in the league. His percentage does not indicate the toughness of threes that he takes. Like, there's a difference between shooting 40% and you only take open threes versus 32% and you're taking a bunch of step-back jumpers. The one big negative is he's been averaging 4.5 turnovers, which is far from ideal, but being the lead ball handler with no real ball handlers around him is far from ideal, and it also is going to lead to a high amount of turnovers. So I don't think it's too high to be too concerned. It's also just been 5 games, so it's not a huge deal. It could very easily come down, but I guess you could say that about his other stats, which I do believe they'll come down a little bit, but I do believe he is an 8 assist per game guy. I do believe he's like an 8 rebound per game guy and a 25 points per game guy. So I do think this start is pretty indicative of how good Luka Doncic is. I hope I use that word correctly, because I often just say words like that assuming that they're correct. KP has been off to a slow start, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 42% from the field, 33% from three. Don't laugh, 69% from the free throw line. 2 blocks a game, which is good, but he looked really bad closing out the game versus LA. Apparently he was bad pretty much in the second half. Started off well, but Anthony Davis guarding him, that's not going to be great for him. A really physical forward versus him who's really just a really tall shooting guard. 8 rebounds per game I had highlighted in my notes here because I do think that's a pretty damn good sign. Granted, the rebounding talent on this team is nothing special. When he made his first All-Star team, averaging 23 points, he only averaged 6.5 rebounds, but he was playing next to Enes Kanter. Now he has Maxi Kleber, who we're going to talk about in a second, and Dorian Finney-Smith, who are the main rebounders with 6 a game apiece. So not as much rebounding there. It's actually 8 for Kleber, I got that wrong, but you get my point. But I do think 8 rebounds, that's a good sign that he can at least be a competent rebounder. He's never going to be a good one, but if you're 7'3", you need to be grabbing more than 6 rebounds a game. That's for damn sure. But as far as his slow start, he hasn't played basketball in a year. I don't think it's anything to be too concerned about. The fact that he is putting up 20 points per game next to Luka, I do think is a good sign that he's at least getting that production. I do think the efficiency will come with time, and I do think with that duo specifically, KP's lower efficiency than you would like from a big man, even if it is a shooting big man, should probably be improved playing next to Luka Doncic, who can set him up well. The year that Porzingis was an all-star, if you did not watch the Knicks that year, which I cannot blame you for because it is the Knicks, he was getting 23 points per game, but it was mostly off of either catch and shoot jumpers that were far from wide open because he was really the only focus of the defense, or he was getting a mid-range fadeaway out of the post, which he did not have the strength to do because he is skinny as hell, and it made him tired, and it made his shot selection worse. It made basically the offense was drawing up tougher shots for him. Shout out to Derek Fisher for that. Assuming that he was the coach then. He might not have been. Whoever it was the Knicks, so it does make sense. But in this offense, he's not going to be doing that nearly as much. I've seen a few post-ups and a few fadeaways from him, but it's not being like one of the foundations of his offense. He's been shooting a lot of three-pointers. He's been screening for Luka Doncic multiple times. And I do think his efficiency to close out the year should be more like 46, 38, 80, or somewhat around there. And as for the role players, that duo, I think, is enough to be the foundation of a playoff team, but you do need the role players to complement it. So far, their most standout role player has to be DeLon Wright. He's averaging 11 points and 4 assists, shooting 60, 56, 90. That's not going to maintain, obviously, but he's a point guard really playing two, since technically Luka is the point guard. But he's like 6'6", so he can play the two guard spot. He is a solid 3-point shooter, solid enough playmaker, ball handler, pretty athletic, can attack the basket, good defensively. He's pretty much an all-around type of guy, not particularly great at anything, not really bad at anything either. Jack of all trades, master of none, if you will. I believe that's something that a Funky Diabetic has said in the past. The next guy that I would want to talk about, who's at least for this year has been better than the guy I'm going to talk about after, but he's probably not better overall. Seth Curry, 38% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. You need spacing around Luka. I think Luka is very much going to be in the same vein as LeBron in terms of if he just gets some shooting around him, good things are going to happen. But the best role player on this team, I think down the line, he's been off to a very slow start this year and had a horrible overtime. But Maxi Kleber is a pretty damn good center/power forward. I'm surprised he hasn't been starting more than he has. He's only started 2 of their games, but he's a really good and smart defensive player, knows to be at the right place at the right time. He's quick on his feet because he's a little undersized, to be honest, but he can play center in the modern NBA anyways. But he's, like I said, a smart defender, gets a decent amount of blocks, gets 8 rebounds a game, which is good for his size, not good overall. And he can shoot the 3 ball, not particularly well, but he can shoot it. Like, you can't leave him wide open. In the playoffs, he's probably someone you would leave open, but not really like that in the regular season anyways. So smart defense, good rebounding, and floor spacing, pretty much a great role player. Slow start, but I think he will pick it up. Made a lot of dumb plays in the overtime, but I really, like I said, I thought the Mavericks were screwed anyway with Luka being messed up, Porzingis sucking, and the momentum going towards LA. Dorian Finney-Smith was in the lineup to close that game, and I really think that's because if Luka is a point guard, you need a small forward out there, and Smith is really the only real small forward on this team outside of one other guy who we'll talk about. He's a really good defensive player and a rebounder, getting 6 a game as a small forward, but he's a poor shooter, shoots less than 30% for his career, and he really should not start because, like I said, spacing around Luka is the way to go. But he can be, I think, a good backup small forward, but currently it's looking like he may be the starter down the line. If it were up to me, I would just put Luka back to small forward, just have him deal with that for now, and then get a small forward in this offseason. Maybe Otto Porter Jr., though I don't want him to leave the Bulls, so please don't do that. But that's who I would target in that position. But Luka at small forward, then have Seth Curry start alongside DeLon Wright, and I think that's a better lineup. That way you don't have to worry about Dorian Finney-Smith starting, but since they don't want to do that, I guess, you know, he's going to be good on defense, but the spacing is not going to be great. Jalen Brunson is a really good backup point guard. He had a good rookie year. I believe he was a second-round pick, but he can space the floor. He's basically like a poor man's George Hill, I believe. I think he could end up being a solid starting level point guard, but maybe he's never quite that on this team unless DeLon Wright starts sucking. So yeah, just a good backup point guard to have, and I think he's ready to contribute to winning now. An interesting player to me on this roster, probably the most interesting in terms of either he could be great for them or horrible, is Tim Hardaway Jr. There is an idea that I kind of understand but don't necessarily agree with, that the idea of Tim Hardaway Jr. is better than Tim Hardaway Jr. Basically he's like J.R. Smith pretty much, but his efficiency is even worse, if you can believe it. He takes even more wild three-pointers, and just not much he can contribute outside of scoring. So I think if he just cooled it with some of the crazy shots that he takes, he could be an integral part of this team and be like a 15-point per game guy off of the bench. He was doing that for them after they traded for him, but it was on very poor efficiency. I believe he could be like a 42 and 36 guy, but not points, like field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. Not a 42.36 assist guy. That would be a little extreme for him. Tim could be a good six-man scorer. He just needs to cool it with some of his attempts and just start hitting them more, because he is a good three-point shooter, but he's also in kind of that same vein as James Harden, where he takes so many, contested ones that his percentage suffers. I think if he calmed that down, though, he could be good. But if he's not calming it down, I do think they need to be pretty careful with how much they're playing him and when they're playing him. He hit a big three-pointer, which was the reason that they went up on the Lakers in the first place with that pass from Luka in the game versus the Lakers. But he's prone to taking a lot of three-pointers when he is not completely wide open. So maybe go for the open ones more there, Tim. But as for how they can improve their roster, as I said, they need wing depth if Luka is going to be a point guard. If you're really desperate, you could sign Iman Shumpert. He is 6'5", and that's not ideal for a small forward, but he can hit threes. He's a good defensive player. He's going to put a lot of his effort on that defense, especially with him being a guy who's would be barely in the NBA. He's definitely going to put up that effort. Not saying he should start, because he shouldn't, but there's also the option of Justin Jackson. He's not a defender, but he could be something offensively. He's currently getting 14 minutes a game. He's been hitting his three-pointers to open the year. But unfortunately for him, he's not much more than a couple three-pointers and maybe a drive off of the catch for a floater. But he can't do much outside of that, and he's not really a defensive player. So I wouldn't bet on him being something good. Maybe I would trade him to a young team for some sort of draft asset and then turn that draft asset into a small forward. But yeah, they could definitely use a starting level small forward who can hit threes and play defense if Luka is going to be a point guard. Now, as for the question of this video, can they make the playoffs? Yes. Luka and KP are good enough to be the duo that gets you in the playoffs in the Western Conference. I fully believe that Luka is going to be similar to LeBron in the fact that he's just going to be one of the 20 to 15 best players in the NBA pretty much by his second year. I really think he's going to continue to play like this as he has to open the season, and I do think that they can get a playoff spot off of that play. Kristaps Porzingis is also the perfect big man in the modern NBA to play off of someone like Luka Doncic. If the role players can be solid enough, which I think they are, they're not great, but they're solid enough, I think they can have a solid enough foundation around Porzingis and Luka to make the playoffs in the Western Conference, especially with Rick Carlisle as their head coach, who is one of the better coaches in the NBA. But being a playoff level team does not necessarily mean that you make the playoffs in the Western Conference, so they may or may not make it. But it is definitely within the realm of possibility. So the Mavericks, playoff bound, maybe. I would even bet on it with the Warriors pretty much falling completely out of that, though the Phoenix Suns are apparently now in it. But if they fall back down to reality of being the Phoenix Suns, then yeah, I do think the Dallas Mavericks, I would even put money on them making the playoffs. So that's the end of this video. Let me know if you think the Mavericks can make the playoffs in the deep Western Conference. And like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.